States. And this is Loathe.
A new era for Cuba as Fidel Castro, the communist revolutionary, steps down. After half a century in power, the world's longest-serving communist leader decides to hand over control at the age of 81.
No more Castro! No more comunismo!
90 miles away in Florida, Cuban exiles give their judgment backed up by President Bush.
I view this as a period of transition and it should be the beginning of the democratic transition for the people in Cuba.
We'll be asking what all this means for Cuba's future and its links with America. Good evening. The world's longest-serving communist leader, the man who ruled Cuba for half a century, has decided to call it a day. In his time, Fidel Castro has fought off an invasion, survived countless assassination attempts and had to contend with no fewer than 10 US presidents. Well, his decision raises new questions, of course, about Cuba's future and its troubled relations with America. First tonight, this report from the BBC's Michael Voss, who's in Havana.
An official resignation letter from an ailing leader read out on state television. Fidel Castro informed the nation that after almost 50 years in power, he would not seek another term in office. Throughout Havana, long queues formed at newspaper stands. Granma is the official Communist Party paper founded by Fidel. People gathered on park benches, digesting the news and wondering what the future might hold. The majority of Cubans were born after the 1959 revolution and have known no other leader. I think everything will stay the same, this man told me. He'll always be our commander-in-chief, this woman said, although others see this as an opportunity for change.
I would like to see my future. I would like to get a better future for my families.
Fidel Castro swept to power in 1959, overthrowing a corrupt American-backed regime. With support from Moscow, he turned Cuba into a communist state just off the coast of Florida. But 81-year-old Fidel has not been seen in public since undergoing emergency surgery 18 months ago. So the idea that he might one day retire has hardly come as a big surprise. Fidel Castro has created a unique form of socialism here in Cuba. The big question now is whether it can survive without its charismatic leader at the helm. So far, though, it's proved a smooth and peaceful transition. As acting head of state, Raul Castro has offered to sit down at the negotiating table with the United States. He's also raised expectations that economic changes, at least, could be on the way. Cuba's economy is in trouble, and not just because of the US embargo. Wages are barely enough to live on, and there's little to buy in the shops. Farmers' markets like these are some of the very few private enterprises allowed in Cuba. There's plenty to buy, but at a price that's really expensive for ordinary Cubans. Whoever takes over now, the real challenge is how to get this state-run economy working again.
Well, that was Michael's report. He joins us now live from Havana. Michael, you raised the prospect there of getting the economy back on the rails. What about relations with America? How is that likely to develop?
Certainly Raul Castro has indicated that he does want to sit down around the negotiating table with the Americans, but not with the Bush administration. He's waiting, he says, until there is a new president in the White House. However, there's certainly bad blood between Senator McCain and the Cubans, and there may be no improvement there. I think there's certainly signs that there may be economic changes here, but no indications whatsoever of any political changes in this one-party state.
Michael Voss in Havana, thank you very much. That's the view from Havana. Well, the news from there was welcomed by President Bush, who said he wanted to help Cubans to realise their dream of liberty and democracy. And that message was echoed by Cuban exiles. Many thousands of them have settled in Florida. Most of them have been deeply opposed to Fidel Castro and his rule. Our North America editor, Justin Webb, reports now from Miami.
No more Castro! No more comunismo!
They hate him here. Fidel Castro stole everything from these people. Entire lives have been lived in exile, and he will never be forgiven. Again and again down the years, they had allowed themselves to hope that the end was near, but it never was. Not until this day, a day of joy and hope in Miami's Little Havana.
I hope it's going to change. I'm going to go to freedom. I get everything that the Cuban need because I live over here in this country.
We want a new government, and a government free. No, in no country, Europe, United States, no, Cuba free, and Cuba for Cuba.
This is Radio Mambi, the Miami station from where, for years, Cuban exiles have bombarded the mother country with news that Castro's days are numbered. This, they tell their audience, is a big day, but they want more. Full democracy, free markets, and so does President Bush.
Eventually, this transition ought to lead to free and fair elections, and I mean free and I mean fair. Not these kind of staged elections that the Castro brothers try to foist off as being true democracy.
The fact is that Cuban Americans are by no means the only Americans to have been frustrated by Fidel. President Bush is the latest in a long line of U.S. leaders who've wanted to get rid of Castro but have failed to find a way to do it.
On January the 2nd, 1959, the rebel army entered Havana.
From the moment he seized power in 1959, Fidel Castro was a thorn in the side of the United States, nationalizing American-owned companies and cozying up to the Russians in the Cold War. Again and again, the Americans tried to topple him, most famously in the Bay of Pigs fiasco. The CIA did their bit as well. Attempts were made to assassinate the Cuban leader, but all came to naught. It was the Russian link that brought the world to the brink of nuclear war when Soviet missiles were sent to Cuba. America prevailed, the missiles went, but Castro stayed. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, Cuba faced collapse as well. In the 1990s, thousands of Cubans risked their lives to flee and join the first wave of exiles across the water in Florida. Castro, against the odds, held on and formed new alliances with Hugo Chavez of oil-rich Venezuela, one of his main modern-day backers. But tonight in Little Havana, they are allowing themselves to believe that the game in Cuba is up. The change they've longed for through all those dismal years might now be at hand.
And we can talk to Justin now in Miami. Justin, we heard the view from Havana and Michael Voss. How do you see this process of change that is now ahead? How will America respond to all of this?
America has to make a decision. They have to make a decision about whether to engage Raul Castro in the terms that Michael Voss was describing. To hold talks with him, maybe not, but at a lower level, to involve themselves with Cuba, to perhaps toy with the edges of this trade embargo that's existed for so long. Does America do that, or does America simply say, rather as President Bush did today, we're not going to do anything until you have democracy? That is the decision that America's next president has to take. And I have to say, I've been coming here to Little Havana for some years now, and there is definitely a change of mood here. It may well be, particularly among younger Cuban Americans, that if the next American president decided to be softer in his approach to Cuba, that he would have some support in this place as well.
Justin, thank you very much. Justin Webb there in Miami.